Hello everyone, this is the second part of the Working with Minitab for the soda bicarb experiment. When I left off the last video I had a pie chart up and I've just gone through and fixed up some of the colours. I've kept the red for Coke, the orange for orange and blue for lemonade, and in the fill colours, data view with groups, I changed the number of colours to 9 so that I could have separate colours here. I changed the Diet Coke to purple. Now it will label everything alphabetically and then from lowest to highest, so you can see that Coke C, D, L, O is the order that it's putting them in. I don't think there's any way to force Minitab to change the order unless you actually put an A, B and C at the start of these words. But once you know the order that it's going to use, you can just match up the order in your colour panel. I've just gone for light blue and dark blue for the low drop and the high drop, and then really light blue, medium blue and dark blue for the amount of bicarb used, low, medium and high bicarb. Could have gone for a different colour, green maybe or something if I wanted to keep that separate. It sometimes can be a little tricky to work out exactly which part of this graphics region you're working in, so there's a little bit of trial and error, or you can just double click straight on the graph and change it directly for that one, but that won't change your default options for future graphs. So if you're going to do a lot of graphing and you want them to come out the same, it's worth trying to find the default options and changing those. Now the other problem I have with this chart is the title has gone off the side. We can drag that around, of course. If we double click it, you can change the font, and I'm going to just match that up to the font that I used in the animation, and I'll see if that fits in, and that just will fit in there. And of course I could change the title of that if I wanted to. So that's a pie chart. Now if I want to start graphing the results, I need to quickly check what type of data I'm graphing. The bar charts and the pie charts are good for categorical data. The time series plot and these area graphs, they're good if I'm taking something, if I have data that has changed over time and it's that time that I'm interested in. What I'm really interested in here though is just the height and the time of the fizz, and these are continuous variables, and so I'm going to want to use any of these first options up here. There's quite a lot to choose from. I could start off with some dot plots just to see where the data points by themselves lie. I'm going to go straight to stacking with groups because I'm mostly interested in the differences between the types of soft drink. So I'm going to say that. Now here where I have the graph variables, it will actually do, if you put more than one variable up here, it will give you more than one graph. Now you can tell it whether you want them on separate graphs or in the same graph, and I'll have them on separate ones, but putting two variables in here will not give you a scatter plot. It just gives you two separate dot plots. And then here I can colour these by the type of soda because that's what I'm most interested in. But if I was interested after, I could come back and look at the height of drop or the amount of bicarb. So when you're putting a plot into a report, you probably want to make a couple of comments about the plot. It doesn't have to be anything particularly difficult. You can just comment on what the features of the graph are. Now with the dot plot of time, the first thing I think that jumps out is that Coke is really spread out. It's really quite variable, and it's higher than all the others except for this one little point in here. The orange and the lemonade seem to be fizzing for about the same time, and then Diet Coke seems to be fizzing the least. And the other thing about the orange and the lemonade is that it's really squished up. They were really consistent fizz time. So it fizzed for, where are we, 17.5 to 20, so about 18 or 19 seconds is how the orange and lemonade fizzed. However, when we look at the dot plot of height, we find that Coke is now in the middle for the height, and it's lemonade that is fizzing the highest and is really going out on a limb by itself here. And Diet Coke is back at the lower end again, which is surprising because all of the videos on the Diet Coke and Mentos experiments on YouTube, from what I gather, they show that Diet Coke reacts more than Coke and other soft drinks to dropping Mentos in. Anyway, this is the results that the students got in this experiment. If I want to look at them both together, which I might, I'm just going to close those off. I might go to a scatter plot. I'm going to keep the width groups. I'm not going to run a regression. I'm not interested in that at the moment. I'm just interested in looking at the data. I'm going to have height going up and time going across because that seems most logical to me, but it doesn't really matter which way around you plot it. And again, I want to colour these by the type of soft drink because that's what I'm most interested in. And here I get this beautiful scatter plot which shows exactly what's going on. Lemonade is fizzing the highest, but it's in the middle of time. Coke is fizzing the longest, but it doesn't fizz that high. And Diet Coke doesn't seem to do anything particularly interesting, and orange is right here in the middle. Now, something that Minitab can do with the scatter plots is to put the box plots on the side. And this was something I did in the presentation, but I actually generated the box plots and the scatter plots separately because I wanted to keep these colours of type of soda. Now, when you put a box plot on the side of a scatter plot, that's called a marginal distribution because the box plot just is referring to one of these responses. So if I show you what that looks like, here we have a marginal plot option. I'm going to, in this case, I'll stick with the box plots, but you could try the others and see how they look. I'm going to go for the scatter plot with the box plots on the sides. Height, time, marginal options, again, you just can double check which one you've chosen. And here we can see what's happening with time and with height. There's a little bit of skewness that you can see with the time, which you would probably guess from looking at those dot plots, but it's usually easier to see skewness when you have a box plot. And I can see that because this third quartile is a little bit bigger than the second quartile. The first and the fourth don't look a lot different, but then there's some extreme observations here that haven't even made it into the whiskers of the plot. The box plot for height seems more consistent, which is what we would expect from the dot plot that we did just of height. And the median seems to be just about smack bang in the middle. Usually if you hover over a graph in Minitab, it'll pop up with some information. I'm obviously not getting it in quite the right, so there it is. Median 91.5 millimetres. Now, if I want to put any more, this is probably the most information you can get Minitab to do by itself. If you want to do more box plots by colours with the scatter plots, you're probably going to have to cut and paste them in a separate application. So what I would do after this is I would just have a look at what happens with the other variables just with some plain box plots. I'm just going to stick with looking at height because the process will be same for looking at time. And we've done the type of soda, but we might also be interested in the drop height just by itself. And here we can see that it looks like you get a little bit more height in your fizz when you drop from higher up. Whether or not this is statistically significant will come out in analysis, but we can see the median is a little bit higher up. And it does seem to extend a little bit further up. We can also do a box plot with the amount of bicarb used. And again, it looks like if you use more bicarb, you do get a bit more fizz. I think this is going to level off. There's going to come a point where it won't matter how much bicarb you drop into your soft drink, you can't get any more fizz because there's just not enough carbon dioxide in there to fizz up. So I'm going to treat this in the analysis as a categorical variable, just as a factor with 3 levels, not as a continuous response, because I don't think it will be a linear response, which means it's going to be trickier to fit at this sort of introductory level. And also because we really don't have enough levels in here to determine what the response is. We can get a feeling for what it might do from these 3 points, but if I really wanted to know what the response curve was going to look like for height versus the amount of bicarb, I'd want to set up an experiment that was dedicated to looking at that and put a whole lot more levels in here to really get a good picture of what the curve was doing. Now we can plot these both together. So this is where you stay with your groups, but pop a couple of them in here. So amount of bicarb and height of drop together. Now every time you do this, it's splitting your data up into smaller and smaller categories, so you're getting fewer data points in each group. So this is still a readable plot at this point. So we say for the 2.5 ml of bicarb, we've got the 80 and the 180 drop height, and it seems to be fizzing a little bit more with the 180 drop height. And then we've got with the 5 and the 7.5. This is a little bit interesting because with the 5 ml of bicarb and the 180 drop height, it actually seems to be fizzing more than with the more bicarb, but that could just be sort of random variation or error in this data set. We could go further and put more on that plot, but I think it's going to become unreadable pretty soon. So this is not a pretty thing to look at. It's very difficult to read with well, I personally find it difficult to read with the Coke, Diet Coke, lemonade and orange on the inside. If you want to change the order that it's putting these in, that will depend on the order that you put them in the options. So if I delete all of those and then start it with the type of soda first, then the drop height and then the amount of BCS, let's try it that way. So this is a little easier to read because we've got the clumps of data, so we can say, okay, this is what happened for Coke and this is what happened for Diet Coke. Lower drop height, higher drop height. You'll notice that these boxes no longer have any whiskers, and that's because we've only got about, I think, 3 data points in each one of these subgroupings, so there's really not enough information there to draw any whiskers. Yeah, we've got the n equals 3 popping up. So I think we've just divided the data up a little too much to look at it graphically, but these differences may still come out in analysis. So you need to make a judgment call as to what's sensible to look at and where you draw the line. I would probably draw the line a little bit before there. I would stick with these plots here.